Hi, and thank you for joining me for another video. And friends, today I want to speak to you about a very, very important topic. How important is it? Well, what if I told you that everything we hold dear is in jeopardy because of this theological virus that has crept into Torah life? And friends, I'm speaking about the Kabbalistic idea of deciphering and understanding Torah known as PARDES. And friends, the reason this issue should be, and in my opinion, is the most destructive force that has ever come against what we call Torah is because, unlike other attempts to alter or change Torah that from their outset could easily be discernible and dismemberable, the erroneous notion of Pardes attempts to hide behind the words of Torah itself. And friends, this brings me to the first universal and philosophical principle you must learn when you have venerated anything in your life. That if you're a Jew, should first and foremost include Torah. And that is, in the case of Torah, that Torah cannot destroy itself. What do I mean? Well, in other words, if Torah says X, there should be no way that in any manner we could possibly turn that X into a Y, which actually is exactly what we're taught by Chazal when interpreting Torah, when it states in Masechet Shabbat, Ein Mikra Yotze Midei Pashuto, that a pasuk in Torah does not ever depart from its literal meaning. So what does this mean? Easy, that the only thing that exists to us is the Pashat, and only the Pashat. And Pashat means the simple literal meaning, to the point that if you analyze the only standard that Chazal ever developed for understanding and applying Torah, known as the 13 principles of exegesis, and even Hillel's previous 7 principles that they were built on, what you will find is that they never deviate from the Pashat. Now, why would they? Because obviously they knew that if they did, they would have been deviating from Torah itself, when it explicitly states in Torah that all the secret things belong to God and only what is revealed belongs to us and our children. And friends, it does not get any clearer than this. So what is Pardes? Pardes means orchard or garden. Now, the word doesn't appear in Torah, but it does appear in Nehemiah, Kohelet, and Shir HaShirim. However, what first gave the term its mystical edge is when it was mentioned in Shas, actually in the Tosefta of Chagiga, which tells the famous story regarding the 4 Tanaim who entered Pardes, in this context meaning the Garden of Eden or Paradise. And those rabbis were Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Elisha ben Abuya, also known as Acher, and Rabbi Akiva. So, briefly, the Midrash states that Ben Azai just looked and died, and Ben Zoma came out crazy, and Elisha ben Abuya became a heretic, and Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and left in peace. And that's pretty much it. Just another obscure Midrash that Lamaisa is not really teaching us anything. No, friends. It's not till the 13th century when a book known as the Zohar took this story to a whole new level. How? By adding whole new mystical sections to the story that weren't in the original. And then, like all other mystical stories, everyone just started adding to it. Like the later Kabbalist Moshe Cordovero, who even tied it into the pagan Sfirot. And, you know, on people kept on adding to it. Well, anyways, the actual notion that Pardes was also a new revealed way of interpreting Torah actually didn't appear on the scene till after the 13th century in one of the later additions to the Zohar. Additions that, of course, mystics still claim was written by the Rashbi. But anyways, these later editions stated that the word Pardes, stood for, like we said, 4 separate levels of biblical interpretation. 4 levels made up by the acronym PARDES. P stood for Pashat, which means the simple, literal meaning, in our opinion, the only meaning. R for Remez, which means hints or clues, basically the deep, hidden, or symbolic meaning behind the text. And then D for Drash, which literally means to search out or to inquire. In other words, the comparative meaning through other similar occurrences within the Peshat, similar to searching for the context of the story. Now, this is clearly a non-problematic method and is certainly a way of properly understanding Torah. And finally, S stood for sod, which means secret or mysterious, which is the esoteric, mystical meaning given either through inspiration or supposed revelation. So friends, just like a broken clock is right 2 times a day, the only problem we have with this acronym is remez and sod. But being that Peshat and Drash already have a place in our understanding of Torah, in the case of Pardes, I think we are safe throwing out the baby with the bathwater, which is a huge trap that many fall into nowadays by thinking that because something may contain some truth, that in some way it should be tolerated and even encouraged. In that case, why not tolerate the New Testament or the Quran as part of our liturgy, which also contain portions of Torah? Now, apart from appearing in the additions to the Zohar, the first time we can tell that the notion is actually embraced and taught by rabbis as a tool for learning is when it appears in the Hakdama of Rabbi Asher's Perush of the Torah. Now, although this concept is first mentioned to us in the Zohar, we even see this esoteric method of biblical exegesis used many times by even popular commentators like Rashi and even Nachmanides, who both existed before the birth of Kabbalah. Teaching us what? Teaching us that, friends, nowadays it's almost impossible to know how deep this rabbit hole really goes. And not to mention the use of such methods like gematria to interpret scripture and build doctrine, which is actually another video in itself. So now you're probably thinking, what encourages people to want to change Torah? And I'll tell you what, power, my friends. Why? Because, friends, that's the only way you could truly immortalize your thoughts and ideas. However, it's kind of hard to do that with a book like the Torah, the 5 books. Why? Because it's so sharp and linguistically clean cut, unlike other works like the prophets that 8 out of 10 times no one really knows what they're saying, which makes it easier to weave in and justify pagan ideas. And this is why we don't build doctrine on the prophets, which is why the Torah went through such lengths to muzzle outside voices. Like when it states Lo tosef halav velo tigra mimenu, that we shouldn't add or take away from what's in Torah. Now, no one here is stating that Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, is a form of adding or taking away. Why? Because Chazal were given the authority to establish practical halacha based on the Peshat in Parashat Shoftim, as well as other places. But they were never, my friends, given the authority to establish esoteric notions or mystical beliefs, especially on hints or foreshadowings in the Torah. Now, many will then say that doesn't Chazal sometimes establish rulings using some figurative, symbolic meaning that may or not literally appear in the text? And the answer is that people shouldn't confuse the Kabbalistic notion of remez with the halachic understanding of asmachtot, in the sense that it is true that Chazal at times use hints in the Torah to establish certain halachot, but these, as explained by the Rambam in his Hakdama to the Mishnah, were only used as marks or anchors that the sages gave us to help us remember the halachot that they had the authority to fabricate. In other words, they did not have the status of midoraita, but midorabanan, which is not what Kabbalists teach regarding remez. Actually, anyone who's familiar with Hilchot Shegagot or Masechet Harayot knows that Chazal never claimed to be infallible. And friends, what we're saying here is not that one on a personal level can understand certain portions of the biblical narrative from an esoteric fashion. That's not what we're saying at all. No, again, from a personal level, you're not limited to which way you want to choose to interpret scripture, as long as it's not contradicting the Peshat and there's no harm done to anyone but possibly yourself. No, the problem is people teaching their esoteric interpretations like divine truth or something halachically or practically applicable to those around them. So some will then say, but isn't the Talmud also full of esoteric midrashim or biblical stories that don't remain within the Peshat? And the answer is, of course, but since when did those opinions in Shas ever become binding? Which is a principle that many have forgotten nowadays, and that I should really remind you of, and that's that any area spoken about by our sages that does not regard a halachic issue is disposable. In other words, as serious Torah Jews, we know that the Talmud itself does not claim to be a divinely inspired set of books, that the purpose of its compilation was only to help us arrive at the halacha, and that's it. And for sure, it was never meant to be used like many fools do today, claiming that its esoteric opinions are part of Torah itself. Actually, this was one of the main reasons for codifications of Jewish law, in a way to muffle Chazal, to give us all what the Talmud should have included in the first place, without all the nonsense. And this, my friends, I believe is one of the main reasons that many people are going off the derech today, because they have realized that Judaism is virtually incomprehensible by the average human. And really, can you blame them? Especially when rabbis constantly repeat the rant that you can't understand Torah without a commentary. So then why try? My friends, if the Torah is not powerful enough and meaningful enough to be understood by the average man, it is completely useless, and we should all today throw it away. So, what's the pashat of this lecture? Easy. That anyone and everyone who paskins or teaches binding Torah from a non-pashat level is a heretic. Clear and simple. For more information about Torah Judaism, please visit doordea.com. Thank you.